At 76 years old, King Charles III broke decades of royal silence with one haunting confession. She was the love of my life, the one I never truly got to grow old with. The words, leaked from a private conversation inside Clarence House, sent shockwaves through Britain. Was he speaking of Princess Diana, Queen Camilla, or someone else entirely? For the first time, the king revealed the truth that duty could never silence. The love that never died. The confession that shook the palace. It happened quietly inside Clarence House on a cool evening in March 2025. Only 2 aides were present when King Charles III, then 76 years old, began to speak more freely than ever before. He had been reflecting on his life, the triumphs, mistakes, and ghosts that still followed him. His voice, usually controlled and measured, softened as he said the words no one expected. She was the love of my life, the one I never truly got to grow old with. The aides exchanged glances, but said nothing. The room fell into heavy silence as the king looked out toward the courtyard, his hands trembling slightly. Within 48 hours, fragments of that private exchange reached the press. Headlines spread like wildfire. Charles's secret confession. Who was the love he lost? The public's curiosity erupted. Was he speaking of Princess Diana, of Queen Camilla, or someone else entirely? The ambiguity only deepened the intrigue. Courtiers described the king's mood afterward as reflective and emotional. For decades, Charles had been known for restraint, a man who spoke in carefully weighed sentences and rarely revealed his inner world. But those who saw him that night said he seemed unguarded, nostalgic, almost weary. He wasn't speaking as a monarch, said one insider. He was speaking as a man finally facing his own past. Across Britain, the confession humanized him. For the first time, the public saw Charles not as the distant figure behind ceremony, but as someone burdened by love and regret. It was a confession that blurred the line between king and man, between crown and conscience. And though the palace moved quickly to frame it as personal reflection, the damage, or the honesty, was already done. By March 16, 2025, royal aides gathered to craft an official response. The statement was brief. His Majesty was recalling life's lessons with great humility. But behind the polished language, tension grew. Within the palace, whispers multiplied. Was he speaking of Diana? Did Camilla know? The question rippled through every corridor, stirring memories of the past. To understand the confession, many said, one must look back to the boy who learned duty before he learned love. A prince shaped by duty, not desire. Charles Philip Arthur. George was born on November 14, 1948, into destiny, not choice. As the firstborn of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, he was raised not as a child, but as an heir. From his earliest years, formality ruled affection. His nursery schedule was timed to the minute, his manners scrutinized, his emotions restrained. It was like being trained, not raised, recalled one childhood friend from Gordonstoun School. He wasn't allowed to feel, only to function. At age 13, Charles entered Gordonstoun, the same school his father once attended, famous for cold showers, dawn runs, and discipline over comfort. Letters written during those years reveal his loneliness. "The cold gets into one's soul here," he wrote in 1962. By the time he reached Cambridge University in 1967, his emotional guard was fully built. Professors described him as intelligent, sensitive, but inwardly isolated. Even laughter seemed practiced. The young prince learned early that every friendship came with scrutiny. He couldn't choose his companions freely. His heart, like his future, belonged to the institution. Even Queen Elizabeth, devoted as she was, kept her relationship with her son formal. A handshake often replaced a hug. She loved him deeply, one royal historian noted, but in her way, through expectation, not expression. For Charles, affection became something foreign, almost dangerous. By his 20s, duty had become his identity. Every decision, where he studied, whom he spoke to, even how he smiled, was measured against the monarchy's image. He didn't live a youth, said biographer Jonathan Dimbleby. He lived a rehearsal. But within that rigid framework, a quiet yearning grew, the need for connection beyond obligation. It was this hunger that would one day lead him toward the first woman who ever saw the man, not the title. By the early 1970s, that chance appeared. During a polo match at Windsor Great Park in 1971, a 22-year-old Charles met Camilla Shand, the lively, unfiltered woman who could make him laugh freely for the first time. Their friendship turned to love, simple, natural, uncalculated. But royal eyes were already watching. For a future king, authenticity was danger. Within months, their story would become the first chapter in a lifelong struggle between crown and heart, the love that never fit the crown. They met on June 10, 1971, under a cloudy Windsor sky. Prince Charles, fresh from naval training, found in Camilla Shand a warmth he'd never known inside palace walls. She was 24, confident, unpretentious, and famously witty. "My great-grandmother was your great-grandfather's mistress," she once joked during their first conversation, and Charles laughed harder than anyone had ever seen him. Friends said it was instant ease, not royal protocol, just chemistry. Over the next 2 years, their bond deepened. They exchanged handwritten letters, long late-night calls, and quiet countryside drives. "She made him laugh without permission," said a friend from the Royal Navy. But as their affection grew, so did the tension around them. Palace advisors and senior courtiers began warning the Queen Mother, "Camilla is unsuitable, her family, her freedom, her reputation." Charles was told plainly, a prince could not marry for emotion. In 1973, he was deployed overseas, and Camilla, pressured by circumstance and perhaps self-preservation, married Andrew Parker Bowles. Charles reportedly received her wedding invitation while aboard the HMS Minerva. "He was silent for days," an officer recalled. Years later, Charles would privately admit, "A part of me stayed with her." That heartbreak shaped every relationship that followed, including the one history would never forget: his marriage to Lady Diana Spencer. Their story became the ghost that haunted the crown. What began as an innocent connection became a forbidden love that refused to fade. Through the decades, through scandal and silence, their bond endured. Not as romance alone, but as a reminder of the one choice Charles never got to make freely. In loving her, he learned the hardest royal truth: that emotion, in his world, was always subject to duty. By 1980, time and expectation had rewritten the story. Camilla was married. Charles was now Britain's most eligible bachelor. When Lady Diana Spencer entered his life, elegant, young, and adored by the public, she seemed to fit every royal requirement. "She'll be perfect for you," his father reportedly said in 1980. But beneath the surface of courtship and ceremony, Charles still carried the ache of a love denied. The stage was set for Britain's most famous heartbreak: the fairy tale that became a prison. On July 29, 1981, the world watched as Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer at St. Paul's Cathedral. Over 750 million viewers across 74 countries tuned in to see what was called the wedding of the century. The golden carriage, the 25-foot train, the balcony kiss. It all seemed like destiny fulfilled. But behind that flawless facade stood two strangers bound by expectation, not understanding. For Charles, it was duty. For Diana, it was hope. From the start, their rhythms never aligned. Diana, only 20 years old, was emotional and spontaneous, craving warmth and connection. Charles, 32, was introspective, cautious, and already weary of the spotlight. They were walking toward different dreams, recalled one aide from Clarence House. Their honeymoon aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia in August 1981 became symbolic. Two newlyweds surrounded by ocean, yet isolated by silence. In public, they shone like royalty was meant to. Every gesture, smile, and glance was rehearsed perfection. But in private, the cracks deepened. Diana discovered a bracelet Charles had commissioned for Camilla Parker Bowles, engraved with the initials F and G, their secret nicknames. That discovery, just days before the wedding, haunted her. "There were 3 of us in this marriage from the start," she would later say. The fairy tale had begun its slow unraveling before the vows had even settled. By 1985, emotional distance had become their daily language. Charles immersed himself in charities and environmental work, seeking refuge in schedules and causes. Diana, feeling unseen, poured her love into motherhood, into William, born 1982, and Harry, born 1984. For the public, they were the perfect family. For the palace, they were an increasingly fragile illusion. The marriage meant to secure the monarchy had instead imprisoned its most human hearts. By 1986, the distance between Charles and Diana could no longer be hidden. Their public smiles masked private despair. The world saw beauty and grace. Behind the palace gates, the silence was deafening. Friends whispered about Diana's tears and Charles's late-night calls to Camilla. The crown demanded perfection, but the people beneath it were quietly breaking. Soon, their pain would no longer be a private tragedy. It would become the most public heartbreak in royal history. Diana's pain and Charles's regret. In June 1992, Britain's calm exterior shattered when private recordings of Princess Diana's phone calls were leaked to the press. The tapes revealed a woman suffocating under the weight of royal life, desperate for love, desperate to be heard. "I was crying out for help," she admitted in a later interview. The world saw not a princess, but a woman betrayed. Behind every diamond and every curtsy was an ache that no crown could disguise. Her famous BBC Panorama interview in 1995 turned private sorrow into global reckoning. "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," she said, her eyes steady yet wounded. Those 12 words reshaped history. Overnight, public sympathy swung entirely in her favor. Charles, painted as cold and unfeeling, became the villain of his own love story. His jealousy of Diana's fame only deepened his guilt. He once confessed to an aide, "She outshone me, and I resented it." Their separation in December 1992 and official divorce in August 1996 marked the collapse of the monarchy's grandest illusion. Yet, despite bitterness, regret crept in. In the privacy of Highgrove House, Charles began to re-examine his role in Diana's suffering. He kept clippings of her speeches and photographs of her with their sons. One staff member recalled seeing him stop before her portrait and whisper, "She was never meant to carry that pain alone." Then came the night that changed everything. August 31st, 1997, when Diana's life ended in a car crash in Paris. Charles received the call at 4:25 a.m. at Balmoral Castle. He went pale, utterly silent, said a courtier who was present. Against palace advice, he flew to Paris to bring her body home personally. Standing beside her coffin, he murmured, "I failed you." The man once accused of indifference was finally broken. Too late for forgiveness, but not too late for remorse. By 2000, time had dulled the headlines, but not the grief. Charles turned inward, dedicating himself to environmental and humanitarian causes, as if service could atone for silence. Yet one person remained by his side through exile, scandal, and sorrow. Camilla Parker Bowles. Once despised, she became his quiet ally. The woman he'd loved before Diana now re-emerged as his confidant. Together, they would rebuild a kind of peace, but the shadow of Diana would never fully fade. The woman who waited in silence. After years of secrecy, judgment, and exile, Camilla Parker Bowles re-entered Charles's public life. It began discreetly in 1999 when they attended a birthday celebration at the Ritz Hotel in London. Photographers swarmed the entrance, shouting her name. She smiled faintly, but said nothing. That night, said one aide, the world finally saw the woman who had always been there. The one who waited. Their relationship, once whispered about in scandal, now stepped into fragile daylight. From 2000 to 2004, the couple slowly rebuilt their public image. Camilla avoided interviews and charity stunts. Instead, she supported Charles quietly, behind the scenes. He admired her endurance, how she endured years of hate, yet never lashed out. "She's the only one who understands the rhythm of my soul," he told a friend in 2003. Their bond was no longer reckless passion. It had matured into partnership, one built from shared endurance. On April 9, 2005, after decades of turmoil, they married in a modest civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. There were no balcony waves, no global broadcast, just two middle-aged souls seeking peace. Queen Elizabeth II, though cautious, later extended her blessing privately. For Charles, the marriage was a balm, proof that even after public humiliation, love could still exist quietly, without spectacle. But even amid this contentment, friends noticed something unspoken, a lingering sadness whenever Diana's name arose. By 2020, Camilla had become indispensable, loyal, steady, and publicly accepted. Yet those close to the king noticed moments of solitude, nights when he sat alone at Highgrove, flipping through photo albums from the 1980s. "He's happy," one confidant said, "but happiness doesn't erase ghosts." For all Camilla's devotion, part of Charles still belonged to the past, to the woman whose memory shaped his every act of remorse. By 2023, Charles's reign had finally steadied, but the weight of memory remained. During a reflective speech at St. James's Palace, he spoke of those we loved but could not keep. The tremor in his voice was unmistakable. Royal watchers knew the line wasn't written by courtiers. It came from the heart. Soon after, whispers began again that the king, in private, had begun speaking openly of another love, one that had never fit the crown. A hidden third love? In late 2024, an offhand remark from King Charles III during a conversation at Sandringham House sparked new intrigue. He spoke softly of a love that could never be, and the line made its way into the press. Historians immediately revisited an old rumor, a friendship from his Royal Navy years in 1974 with a civilian woman known only as Eleanor. She was intelligent, independent, and utterly uninterested in palace life. He admired that she didn't bow, said one former naval aide. According to letters preserved in the royal archives, Charles and Eleanor exchanged brief correspondence over 2 years. Her handwriting, elegant yet firm, spoke of art, travel, and solitude, never rank or duty. But by 1976, when Charles's naval command ended, the letters stopped. Court advisors later confirmed she'd refused a formal introduction to the Queen. "I couldn't belong to a crown," one note read. That quiet goodbye stayed with him long after headlines forgot her name. When asked decades later about his greatest lessons in love, Charles reportedly replied that the right heart at the wrong time remains wrong. Friends say he kept a small sketch she once sent, a sailing boat adrift at sea. "He never called it regret," said an old friend from Cambridge. But when he looked at that drawing, he stopped speaking. The notion of a third love, pure, impossible, and unclaimed, deepened the mythology around his confession. For royal historians, the story filled a missing space between Camilla's endurance and Diana's heartbreak, a reminder that even before both women, Charles's life had already been marked by love interrupted. Whether Eleanor existed or not, her legend became symbolic, the embodiment of every emotion he was forced to silence. It reminded the world that even princes had moments when choosing duty meant losing themselves. By early 2025, talk of Eleanor drifted through tabloids and documentaries alike, painting Charles as the monarch haunted by 3 women, one lost to time, one lost to tragedy, one who stayed. The speculation stirred renewed curiosity about his mental state. Insiders began noticing changes in his tone, speeches more introspective, pauses longer. It was clear the king was revisiting old ghosts, not for drama, but for peace. And soon, those reflections would move from whispers to words heard worldwide. Reflections of a king haunted by the past. On January 27, 2025, during a Commonwealth address at St. James's Palace, Charles's voice wavered when he spoke of those we loved but could not keep. The audience applauded politely, unaware that the king's script had been altered only hours earlier. He had crossed out lines written by aides and replaced them in his own handwriting. "It sounded like farewell," one diplomat remarked afterward. Behind that polished speech lay decades of confession finally spilling through royal restraint. In private, Charles's evenings at Highgrove House grew quieter. Staff reported that he often sat in his study past midnight, rereading letters from 1971 to 1997, from Camilla, from Diana, perhaps from someone else entirely. "He carries memory like a burden," said one close confidant. In his desk lay a small box labeled Private Hearts. Inside were photographs, pressed flowers, and folded notes. Pieces of a life lived under scrutiny, but remembered in silence. Friends visiting him in February 2025 described a gentler man, more at ease with reflection than authority. "He's making peace with ghosts," one courtier said. The king had started corresponding with his sons more openly, even sharing memories of their mother, a gesture he'd avoided for 28 years. "He wants William and Harry to know who he truly was, not who history wrote," the aide added. It was the closest he had come to forgiveness of himself. For Britain, these glimpses of vulnerability reshaped his image. No longer the cold heir or the stoic monarch, Charles appeared fully human, a man scarred by the cost of duty. Each mention of Diana's name, each tremor in his voice, invited empathy where judgment once lived. For a nation raised on royal restraint, seeing its king haunted yet humble felt like witnessing history soften. By spring 2025, that speech ignited a storm of commentary. Television panels debated whether the king's reflections were wisdom or weakness. Meanwhile, within Buckingham, tension simmered. Queen Camilla, once the anchor of his later years, now felt the chill of public nostalgia for Diana. "It's like the past is winning again," she confided to a friend. And as sympathy for Charles grew, so too did questions. How would the monarchy survive when emotion began to eclipse protocol? The reaction. The leak of Charles's private remarks reached the press on April 3, 2025. By dawn, front pages screamed, "King haunted by Diana, admits lost love." Public sentiment divided overnight. Many Britons expressed compassion, calling it long overdue honesty. Others called it betrayal to the Queen. Within hours, #TheTrueQueen and #4Diana trended across social media platforms, reaching over 12 million posts by evening. Buckingham's communication office scrambled to reframe the narrative, but emotion had already seized the story. Inside the palace, reactions were mixed. Some aides described Camilla as visibly shaken, yet defiant. "After all these years, he still lets her ghost in," she reportedly told a confidant. For Charles, the controversy reopened wounds he'd hoped had healed. He canceled 2 public engagements in Windsor that week, citing private reflection. Behind closed doors, he told staff, "Perhaps truth was always my final duty." Those words, quietly spoken, became the headline of the decade. Internationally, the confession stirred fascination. In Australia, tabloids hailed him as the honest king. In Canada, headlines questioned the future of the Commonwealth's emotional tie to Britain. In France, newspapers called it royal tragedy revisited. Meanwhile, American networks revisited footage of 1981, 1995, and 1997, looping Diana's smile beside images of the aging king. It was as if time itself had turned back, demanding emotional closure on a story the world had never stopped following. Amid the uproar, Charles remained composed in public appearances, though quieter, slower. Observers noticed his eyes linger longer on portraits of Diana during visits to memorials. "He seems to be saying goodbye all over again," one journalist remarked. What had begun as a confession became a mirror for millions, a reminder that even the crown could not shield a man from his own heart. By May 2025, as the media frenzy softened, the monarchy faced a new question. What comes after confession? Approval ratings wavered, but did not collapse. In a rare moment of unity, both William and Harry issued a joint statement praising their father's human honesty. The gesture calmed the storm, but the lesson lingered. For the king, truth had come at a price. Peace bought with exposure. All that remained was the reckoning. How history would remember him. Legacy of love and regret. By summer 2025, Britain's mood had shifted. The king, once seen as distant, was now regarded with cautious affection. His confession, the quiet admission of lost love and remorse, redefined his reign. He gave the monarchy a heartbeat, wrote The Times in July 2025. Yet the paradox remained. His honesty revived Diana's legend even as it redeemed his own. The story of their intertwined lives had become Britain's most enduring tragedy, retold through generations that never knew them. At 76 years old, Charles now spends long evenings at Highgrove tending his garden, speaking softly to staff about cycles, roots, and renewal. Visitors describe him as serene, but with an air of reflection that never leaves. He still wears the signet ring Diana chose for him in 1981, a symbol of vows that time could not erase. "He's found peace," one gardener said, "but peace doesn't mean forgetting." For Charles, memory and monarchy now coexist. For Queen Camilla, the storm has quieted but not vanished. She fulfills her duties with dignity, aware that history will always place her in Diana's shadow. The two women's stories, intertwined through one man's heart, have defined half a century of British monarchy. Yet even she concedes privately, he loved her differently. That acknowledgement, painful but truthful, allows the crown to move forward, built not on denial, but on acceptance. As autumn settles over Buckingham Palace, the king's words echo in retrospectives, books, and documentaries. Even kings can love too late. It has become his epitaph in life, a sentence that bridges power and pain. For a nation once enthralled by fairy tales, Charles's confession reminds them that love, not lineage, is what humanizes the throne. In the end, the monarch who waited too long to speak found freedom, not through silence, but through sorrow. Now, as Britain reflects on his reign, that single confession has reshaped how history will remember him, not as a distant ruler, but as a man who carried regret behind the crown. At 76, King Charles finally admitted what the world long suspected: even kings can love too late. And as the nation listens to his quiet truth, one question remains: was his greatest sacrifice the throne itself, or the heart he left behind?